Hello, and you are listening to Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. I interview leaders who inspire me in the areas of exponential technologies, business innovation, entrepreneurship, thought leadership, enterprise IT security, neuroscience, philosophy, personal development, and more. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Bill Murphy, your host of the Red Zone podcast. My guest today is Shannon Emmons, Senior Product Manager with SonicWall. Shannon and I caught up after our cloud and email kill chain lunch event yesterday, in which we had a record number of CIOs attend. And it was great having Shannon talk with my CIO and Lieutenant community. And she's a top person for managing the product development of cloud app security line with SonicWall. So it was a real treat having her being the top of the pyramid for developing this really important product line for SonicWall. And from a security strategy perspective, the importance of deciding on a platform for security threat management, blocking, detection, and response as it relates to SaaS apps and your data has never been more important for your business. So it's a very much a strategic decision for a CIO to pick a platform. And what I'm referring to in particular is securing Office 365, OneDrive, Box, Dropbox, G Suite, Salesforce, Slack, essentially any way that data can leave your organization. Now we can put policy around and we can govern it. And data stored in the cloud is your responsibility, not the cloud vendor. And some of the other things I want you to learn from listening to this conversation is why default SaaS app security controls are not enough, and regaining visibility and control of your SaaS email apps and taking a holistic approach, and how to protect account takeovers from insider threat protection and compromised credential theft. And we also did discuss API-based security and why this is very important as you look at security moving forward, is asking questions about your API-based security and the difference between a CASB and a CAS, and the difference between essentially a broker that lays in front of your apps versus one that's resident within the SaaS app itself. So for CIOs, this is a very important decision to just understand enough technically and understand enough of it so that your teams can execute on a platform strategy and not something that you're gluing together with multiple different vendors. That's a big mistake I see made is sort of taking this glueware approach versus finding a vendor that's building native, in which you can start collapsing the amount of products you have and start collapsing the amount of panes of glass and consoles that your team has to log into, because your team just can't do it. It's too much. And then you start looking at outsource vendors to manage this, and it gets too much for them. So you've got to take a 12, 24, 36 month perspective on this and start driving this as platform and reducing your amount of portfolio products as you start looking at cloud app security to rein in the exposure across your cloud footprint. So I want to welcome all of you to listen to this, and here is Shannon Emmons, Senior Product Manager with SonicWall's Cloud App Security. Thank you. All right, Shannon, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thanks, Bill. Happy to be here.
So we just finished a great event.
It was awesome.
What was your experience like?
It was really good. I love doing these kind of events, and to have the audience so engaged, when asking questions and what does the technology do or what does a holistic approach look like was really valuable. And, having those one-on-one conversations with customers, whether they buy your product or somebody else's, as a product manager, you get so much value from that feedback. What are they thinking? Really, what are they looking for? What are their use cases that maybe we've considered an edge case that isn't? So it was great.
Yeah, it'd be interesting from your perspective, getting that pulse from the field. Yeah. Of like what you can almost get a sense from, because when I'm out with the questions and answers, people had a lot of really, really good answers and good questions that and you answered it really, really wonderfully. How often do you do like this type of field presentations and things like that?
So I'm doing more and more of them. So
Okay.
I joined SonicWall about a year ago, and one of the reasons I was brought on was to help launch the cloud app security product. So, until early April, late March, I didn't have a product that was available in the field. So a lot of my conversations are one-on-one with partners, we're getting them embracing the technologies. But now that we've launched and we've been out for a little bit, I'm doing a lot of partner roadshows to kind of help educate, the market, not only on just the product offering, but the risks to the SaaS space. So I've been on the road for the last couple of weeks. I got more partner roadshows coming up. I do as many as I can. So This is the best part of my job.
Yeah, because you're really getting that feedback, direct, kind of no latency, no abstraction,
unfiltered,
no interpretation, so you can hear it live from the buyers, which is great. So let's take a couple steps back. How did you get involved in technology? Like, were you always from like high school on, just like down the tech path, or how did this emerge?
So it's funny. I was always on the tech path, apparently, unbeknownst to me, even through high school. And one of my former classmates reached out to me a couple years ago on LinkedIn, and he was like, you know what? I always knew you would be in software. And I'm like, what? He was like, you re-networked everything in the entire school. Like, you got all the apps running. You did it. And I was like, I guess I never realized that. But it wasn't a direct career path. I actually wanted to go into journalism. And so I, did that for college for a couple of years and was very quickly bored. And I wanted to get out of my parents' house. So I went to work and I hired on as an admin assistant for a VP of IT, and he had always done everything himself, so he wouldn't give me anything. And after 3 weeks and 10 novels later, I was like, I'm sorry, but I have to have something to do, or this is not going to work out for both of us. And so he handed me their help desk. Oh, wow. And so I did that for, a long time. I redid their help desk and kind of got into that. I did some network admin. And then I joined McAfee in tech support, actually, tier 1 tech support back in 2003, which feels like a million years ago now. So I just kind of worked up the ranks, and I spent a lot of years, eight plus years in tier 3 as a critical escalation engineer for our large corporate customers. So I worked with development and product management and different groups throughout the company. And, product management jobs didn't really open up in McAfee at that point very often. And there was an opening, and one of my previous PMs was like, I think you would be great if you thought about this. And I hadn't. And so I took the leap, and it's been really good. I think coming from tech support gives you a really good balance as a product manager, because you're able to really help identify pre-issues, things that you could see being a challenge for support or a challenge for customers, so you can kind of avoid those up front. And so it's been great. I love it.
No, I didn't realize the importance of product managers for vendors. And I've been in the business for 20-something years. So we've always been on the reselling support side of the fence, and we've always interacted with SEs and the sales for the vendor. But I did not really realize how important the PM, the product management vertical per product is until we've been working with SonicWall.
Yes.
And so it's been really fun interacting with you on the cloud app security side, and Dimitri as well on his side. But it's been kind of an opener that the folks here listening today, it was like, this is their gateway in right up to the top, essentially, and getting their feedback heard.
Yes.
And so it's neat.
Yeah. No, and it gives you a really good balance. One of my former executives mentored me quite a bit. And one of the things that he taught me, and I always come from a very customer-focused approach, but one of the things that he did teach me was focusing on the customer outcome. What's the value for the customer? Because nobody cares about your next new widget if it doesn't solve a problem. And that's true. I mean, it is absolutely true. And so
it's like a product looking for a solution, or a product that we built this cool product looking for a problem to solve.
Exactly. So, I always look at, what can we bring to the customer to make their lives easier? Having worked in the space for a long time, I've seen the challenges that administrators face with multiple products and bolted on technologies and pieced together, infrastructures. And so when I look at products and we look at business requirements as a whole within SonicWall, we look at how can we make this easiest for the customer and still solve the problem in the least amount of steps for them.
It's interesting. I didn't think about that but you're right. Sometimes the software vendors have solved it by glueware. Like, we're just going to glue these two technologies together and call it our new system.
Yes, I love cloudified technologies.
Cloudified. Okay,
Yes.
That's another good one. Let's talk about cloud app security, and in particular, the problem that a CIO would have with users that want to use Box, Dropbox, or whether or not they're asking for permission or not. They're using Box, Dropbox, OneDrive. They're using SharePoint and Teams. And, I just left the Microsoft conference, and from Satya all the way down, they're talking Teams. Like SharePoint was their big mother lode many years ago. Teams is that for them moving forward. Like literally, the reps are being compensated. They want what are they calling it? Workload or subscriptions or something like that. They want more people on Teams. And so how does SonicWall fit in with helping a CIO be able to have data on their organization, move into Teams, move into other SaaS apps like Box? And how does that work? And what problems does SonicWall solve?
Yep. So that's a great question. So one of the things that we see kind of across the SaaS industry, and as customers make their migration to cloud, security is oftentimes an afterthought, right? Particularly when you look at things like Box or Dropbox or some ad hoc, app of the day, somebody needed it at that point in time, and now they've used it, and your IT staff may know, they may not know. You may have company data out there that you may or may not know about at risk for a breach. Data exfiltration, threat space. And so, one of the things that we as SonicWall focus on for Cloud App Security product is the SaaS protection space. If you're using multiple SaaS apps, so if you're using something like Office 365 Suite and Box and Dropbox, or, eventually Slack or eventually Salesforce, in most cases in organizations, they are managing those policies and that data and threat space differently. Some people assume that the cloud service providers are responsible for taking care of, protecting them from threats, and they're not, and they'll call it out in their contracts. Yep. It's never in big red print like we show, right, in slides, but the customer is, responsible for protecting that data. If their admins are using multiple SaaS products, they increase their risk because all the products look and feel different. They all have different security controls. Most of them don't include advanced threat protection by default. They're not correlating events or getting a cohesive view across their SaaS space into what's being used, login activity, data that's out there. They don't know if it's compliant. And so we really focus on a holistic approach. So when we talk about protection for Office 365, we talk about the suite. So we talk about your email, your OneDrive, your SharePoint. Teams will be coming online soon. Ironically, I don't think I've met a person yet who really likes SharePoint. So it's good that Microsoft is kind of making a push for something else. But collaboration tools are becoming more and more hot in the market and in the threat space. You can transmit files back and forth. You can share different data. They're stored in the cloud most times. Yeah. How do you protect that? So we focus on the suite protection in addition to other SaaS applications that you're using. So you get a combined view, you get consistent policies, right? That reduces your risk. Everything looks and feels the same. There's no mind mapping for administrators on what does this DLP policy look like versus, in SharePoint or Box or, Slack.
So let's talk about policies for a second, just so everybody understands how you're defining, because I thought it was interesting. We had someone ask about DLP, which is it's a rough, we look at order of magnitudes of 0, really easy security, to 10, hard security. Like DLP, there's nothing about 0. It's like, it's 9 or 10. I mean, this is hard. So I loved your answer to that question. And part of it had to deal with policy, but maybe you can answer where you guys fit in the DLP world and what an example of a policy would be.
Absolutely. So in the context of DLP for SaaS protection, what we provide today is a very easy to use compliance-based DLP. And what that means is you don't need to have data classification in process. You don't need to be working on it. We provide you compliance-based templates like SOX templates or intellectual property templates, PII, PHI, HIPAA, things along that nature. You can enable these templates with a simple check mark. Okay. We use regular expressions and we do pattern validations, account number checking, different formats. We use a series of keywords. This implementation right now is not customer configurable beyond checking or unchecking the templates. So you can't do the granular rules, but we also find that a lot of people get very overwhelmed.
That's what kills it.
Yeah, exactly. With a robust DLP solution. And then they're overwhelmed. They don't use it and they're either sending sensitive data to the cloud and they don't know it and they're at risk, or they're in breach of compliance, or they just stop using the SaaS app. And that's a load on them too, because we want them moving to these better infrastructures, these more updated apps, and we want to help them embrace that.
So if I'm a sales rep let's come up with a simple situation. So if a sales rep that might be a remote worker, headquarters in DC, using Salesforce and the cloud app security, and for some reason they have a document they want to ingest into Salesforce, and maybe it's a legal contract, or maybe it's it hits one of the triggers.
Yep.
So what happens to that file? Like, does it just get, if it's on its way into Salesforce from that sales rep's laptop, does it, from Exchange, let's say you're using Exchange product from Microsoft on 365, how does that whole file interaction happen? Like, what goes on there?
So in the context of Salesforce, which is something we're looking at in the future, the way that it would work is similar to what we do with Office 365. So we're API-based technology. So we sit within the SaaS app itself.
Okay.
We install our event collector to monitor activities, right, and monitor those files. And then we install a protection app as well into the SaaS space. So when an end user uploads a file from their desktop or their phone or whatever into the SaaS app, the SaaS app's default security controls will engage. So whatever, base AV they provide, or, base for email, anti-phishing or whatever, they'll engage. And then everything they send up in a scan that comes off as clean by the SaaS provider, we pick it up and we run it through all of our advanced algorithms. So the advanced threat protection, if it's a file and an email attachment, or anti-phishing technology, anti-spam technology, just depending on what type of data it is. But, one of the advantages is that we sit within that SaaS space. So we protect the data within the space versus it coming from a laptop or a phone or, whatnot. So as soon as it hits the APIs for the SaaS provider, we'll engage our scanning technology.
So it's like a shim client of some sort, right? It's like a shim that sits in that, because their vendors opened up that API.
Exactly.
It allows you to engage with that as that document goes. And it's looking at the whole document, or is it looking at just the email itself? Or
no, it'll look at the whole document.
Okay.
So if it's just a straight file upload, we're going to pick up the file and we'll scan it with ATP. And then if you've got DLP enabled, the actions that we take on the file are dictated by the customer. So if the customer has configured their policy, they want to quarantine the file, they want to send it to a vault, something of that nature, maybe they want to do nothing, they just want to alert on it.
Yeah.
They have that flexibility to make the best business decision for them. In the context of email, what we do is when the email comes in to, say, Office 365, if it's got an attachment, not only are we scanning the email, we scan the emails for, anti-phishing, of course, and also impersonation threats.
Okay.
We also do advanced URL scanning, not just within the body of emails, but within the attachments themselves as well. So that attachment will get scanned by our Capture ATP in addition to just your regular email scanning.
We had a lot of questions about logins and login failures, and then when you're in, data exfiltration out. Maybe you can talk to that a little bit and just talk about you also call that account takeover.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So one of the concerns that we have in the SaaS app space is credential compromise. I think on a personal level, almost everybody that you talk to has had their credentials compromised in some way. I think the statistic for 2017 was 2.3 billion. Those accounts are sold on the dark web for less than $1 each with a guaranteed password. Which is frightening. And so if you're an organization, you're using SaaS apps and you get compromised credentials for one of your users, that's an infiltration point into your environment. It's an infiltration point to your data.
Yep.
Maybe it's customer data, maybe it's employee data. That data can be exfiltrated. And so one of the things that we provide, in addition to the DLP, where you can prevent sharing from external information, is also account takeover prevention. So we give you visibility into your user behaviors that fall outside of their established normals. So we build a unique profile for every single user that uses that SaaS app. We use tons of different data points, right? What kind of device do they log in from? Is it a managed device? Is it unmanaged? They come in through a VPN. Do they log in from a specific continent? How much data do they upload? How much data do they download? And we build that profile and we maintain it. So it evolves going forward. And then anything that deviates from that we bring to your visibility. So one of the things that I demo typically is Geo Suspicious Activity.
Okay.
So I can simulate logging in from multiple continents within a very short period of time into my Office 365. And then the alert that the admin gets is suspected credential compromise. Okay. And it will give me the IP addresses and a map of where the location is, right? So you can go down, I think, to within 3 blocks of where the IP address is.
Oh my.
And so it alerts the admin that you need to look at this. That will evolve going forward because not every anomaly is malicious. And so you, as an administrator, you want to investigate and confirm, right? Is that malicious behavior? But we're going to give you that quick visibility. We'll give you as much information as we can. And if you're using multiple SaaS apps, we're going to correlate that activity across them. So you don't have a singular app view. We know what your users' behavior are in each of the SaaS apps they're using.
Now, how is that going to be different if someone logs in with with Active Directory and they're just, for Microsoft, if they're logging in through AD and using MFA and conditional access, for example, where would you pick up there? Yeah, I think that's my question is how would, and that's a pure Microsoft question, but maybe it's logging into Amazon as well. And so, but there's potentially a domain controller there. Like, how do you integrate? Like, is it completely separate, or are you looking for different parameters because you're wedged into the SaaS app itself?
We do it a couple of different ways. One, we'll track failed logins, right?
Okay.
So if they're not getting through your AD, we get that event from the SaaS app itself, and we'll report a failed login attempt. Some people don't find that valuable. They want to know when somebody gets in. Where we pick up from the potential compromised account visibility perspective is when the user logs in, right? So if they've already gotten through your AD or your single sign-on, you've got a big problem, right? They've already breached that. And so now we can see the login activity, we can see the user behavior, and then we bring you in that visibility.
Okay.
So you kind of have to look at it in 2 different aspects. You know, failed logins, we know about them, we'll report them. We're not going to, necessarily call those out as potential compromise. We give you the data to look at. I had a customer last week that actually asked me to look at some of their data for them. They had a exorbitant amount of Geo Suspicious login activity for failed logins for a 60 employee company, right? And they had 800 plus logins over a 7-day period of time from like all over the globe. And they're in England and I think Scotland. So and so they were like, this is not right. But they were concerned that somebody was attempting, to get in. Like that was their approach. They hadn't got in yet, but we were bringing the visibility that somebody was attempting to get in. So it was something they could be in tune with and they could be on the lookout for. Somebody does get in through your other authentication mechanisms, we are there to alert you that you've got this type of suspicious activity. Maybe it's somebody pulling down large data. Yeah. All of a sudden, Susie started logging in at 2 a.m. She's never done that before, or she's logged on and logged off. Maybe all of a sudden, multi-factor authentication has suddenly become disabled. Oh, yeah. Things like that.
Oh, that's interesting. So what about if there's an unusual, download of information, or if someone's in an authorized way, but all of a sudden they normally average consuming 10 megs and now it's 25 or 30, is that a possibility?
It is a possibility. Okay. It is something that we would look to alert you to because it would fall outside of their established norms, right? And so when the behavior deviates, and it's all AI based, it's not customer configurable today, we look to do some additional workflows in the future around that. So, there is the potential that it could be valid behavior, but we're going to bring it to your visibility and let you make the determination so that you can be aware, because it is pretty abnormal for somebody who uploads, 10 megs a day or downloads 10 megs a day to all of a sudden, pull down a 70 meg file. Maybe it's from a different location they haven't accessed before. This is all what we would just call general weirdness, right? It's suspicious, and you want to be on the lookout.
How do you build from the AI and machine learning? We talked about this today, that we're trying to build that automated threat response so that we can confidently tackle cloud architecture. And what is your thoughts about that? Like, when do you think the CIO would truly be at a point where they can feel confident treating their cloud architecture just like it used to be in the old-fashioned data center?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't think about that one. I'm a suspicious person by nature. I've worked in cybersecurity probably far too long. I would never feel comfortable with anything that's outside your organization. Yeah. But what I would say is this, once you've used a tool for several months, you build a level of comfort. With anything that's AI-based or machine learning-based, there is going to be some nuances off the bat. It has to learn the environment. It has to learn the behaviors to figure out what your space looks like. So there's going to be some tweaks that'll probably needed with any technology. We heard somebody today that was, speaking about, well, they were using a different technology on their endpoints and they had a lot of false positives. But then when you look at their scenario, what they were doing, which James brought about, was they're actually doing hacker-like activity. So AI was working and machine learning was working. And so a lot of times we think those nuances are kind of painful, but generally when we look at them, they're actually simulating some type of bad behavior. And so do you err on the, I'm not going to report this, or do you err on the side of caution, right? And so, I think you have to get comfortable with the tool for a couple of months in your environment before you can feel really, really good and secure about, your deployment. And I would think, though, that anything in the cloud, the cloud is great. It's somebody else's computer. You always need to be cognizant of that. And your attack surface just increased. Your attack surface is no longer inside your walls, and users are mobile. They come in from everywhere, all kinds of devices, and you have to be cognizant of that. The threat landscape changes almost every day. So you have to stay on top of that. Comfort is not in this industry, I don't think.
How important is cloud app security for SonicWall moving forward? How much do they see it as something that's a strategic advantage they can bring to the marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that SonicWall has done in a very short period of time is expand their portfolio. Yeah. The cloud app security space is one of those expansions. We all see, I think, as many of us have worked in the tech industry for years, right? The move to cloud is just going to continue to increase. If we're not providing protection, somebody else is. And one of the things that we look at SonicWall as a whole is the platform approach. In my previous life, I managed a product that supported a multitude of different applications. And so it's very hard for customers, to use multiple consoles, use multiple products. And you want to bring them together so that they can be more effective, they can be more efficient, they can reduce their risk. And one of the approaches SonicWall has taken with the Capture Cloud platform is to do that. And this is a piece. Of this, because if we're not providing protection for you as a customer, whether you're using our firewalls or wireless or endpoint or not, somebody else is, and you need to be protected. So our customers that are, whether they're new customers or existing customers, we want them to have a cohesive protection strategy across their threat space.
Yeah, I can't think of anything more important right now than to figure, we talked about that today, is being able to plug multiple different security lines into an overall platform. I think it's so critical because right now it's just too many devices in the mid-market for people to watch, and they don't have the capital, they don't have the talent. I mean, there's talent shortage. They don't have the resources to go tackle this all. So settling into a platform which you can plug in different capabilities is so critical. And so we had talked about, okay, well, we were invested in Microsoft. And people are going to be putting so that we have Azure Play, we have Amazon, we have AWS. And I was having an interview with the CIO of Experian last week. And he says, I don't care which platform I'm on. He goes, I'm building so I can be portable across the cloud. Yeah. I want, he was using Kubernetes and Docker and all of these programming capabilities. And I thought that is really cool. It's a really interesting approach for a Fortune 50 or 10, whatever they may be, to be able to have the fortune to be able to just, it doesn't matter if he's in Google Cloud or he doesn't care. And I thought, well, gosh, that has to be the vision for the mid-market is we have to have a vision so that we don't care where people are putting their assets. Right now we do. Yeah. But gosh, if we had this capability where you could see and govern data going into Dropbox, into Microsoft, into Google, to me, that would be so powerful.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, I don't think a lot of the executive staff necessarily realize the amount of consoles their organization uses to manage their security posture. And it's very challenging for the administrators, and it's very challenging to do not only roll-up reporting, but get a comprehensive view across that threat space. And one of the things that actually brought me to SonicWall is I'd worked with SonicWall peripherally as a partner for years, and I'd always considered them kind of just a firewall company, and they'd been trying to recruit me for a while, and I'd kind of been probably blowing them off a little. And then one day I was like, I should probably think about expanding. I've been here for a really long time and maybe I'm stagnating a bit. I should probably think about growing. And so when I went and looked at their portfolios since they had divested out of Dell, I was like, oh my gosh. I worked for a very large security player that had a very similar trajectory in terms of being acquired and being spun out. And what SonicWall has been able to do and really just hone in on the Capture Cloud platform and just start taking it to the next level continuously is really impressive. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to join.
Yeah, it's funny the amount of momentum, because we were involved with SonicWall in the early days. Well, for us, 2005, even when they were founded in 2001, we were just involved very, very early. And the team was just very assertive and they had a great growth trajectory. And then we sort of went into a bit of the dark ages with Dell. But then since coming out, it's just been complete momentum, which has been great because I think security needs that. And it's been a lot of fun. Like 51 awards last year, and people don't understand. It's funny, the questions coming from the audience, the space is moving quickly, but people don't sit there and just read about a vendor, but they sit there and they actually take a step back and like, oh my gosh, you can handle wireless, you can handle firewalls, you can handle my virtual firewalls, my web application firewalls. Now you've got cloud app security, and really? There's a difference between API security and MTA security. Do we cover that yet?
We didn't cover that yet.
That's a good segue because I was like, oh my gosh, we got to talk about that. But then when you sit back, you go, that's a lot of capability, and be able to have a limited console. I think the strategy's there, and it's really fun. And the API part, I actually had to dive in with my CTO a bit because I didn't quite understand it, but now I get it. But if you could explain for everybody, like, what is the difference between like an MTA approach from security versus like an API in the cloud world?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of the key differences when you're talking about an MTA-based technology, typically you're talking about an email security gateway, right? And so they sit in front of your exchange, right? And then they protect just email, which is fine if that's all you need. But as we've moved to the cloud and we move to things like Office 365 that have multiple apps within that suite, you have a broader need. It's not just email. Yes, you need email protection, but you also need to protect your OneDrive. I can't tell you the amount of customers that I talk to that when I ask them, do they know what's in their OneDrive and how are they protecting it? And they just look at me like a deer in the headlights. And that's a scary place to be. You need to protect that data. You've got your SharePoint, now you've got Teams coming in. And so some of the key advantages of an API-based technology is not only ease of deployment, like we can actually onboard you. I think it's like 6 questions. And when I demo it, it's like 4 minutes. Now, if you want to read every single line on the permission screen when we give you the pop-ups, it's probably going to take a little bit longer. But you can get a good, your good sampling and your good onboarding, and then you're running your compliance scans already within 4 minutes, which is huge. There's no latency for your end users. It's seamless to them. They don't know it's there because we sit within the SaaS app itself. There's no agents on the endpoint. There's no separate portal for them to log in. However, they're logging into their SaaS apps today. They continue to do that. So one of the ways that we leverage the SaaS providers, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is everything they scan and they pass as clean, we pick it up and we continue scanning. And then we scan it with our advanced protections. And so the reduction in latency, because we're API-based, so we're really contained for the majority of the information within that same space, is huge. There's no redirect of traffic that's needed. There's no changing of MX records that's needed. We've used terms like CASB, which is somewhat of a turnoff to you for people. We're not a broker, so you don't have to deploy a broker. You don't have to deploy logon connectors. So CASBs also typically don't provide email protection from the security perspective. They don't necessarily claim to be a DLP solution.
They're just a broker.
Exactly.
They carry you into the tent and wherever you're going, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so being API based and we don't have anything to deploy, I don't like to refer to us as a CASB. We took a holistic approach to protect not only just your email, but also your other SaaS apps within that suite that you're using. So we focus, which is not something that your MTAs can do. And there's also deployment overhead with MTAs, and there's some key differences there.
It's a nuance, but it's a very important one.
It is. It is because that protection space has expanded. And one of the things that we see in one of the very large enterprise customers that I've worked with is, in larger organizations, their IT admins or their security admins are typically segregated. You have somebody who manages email, and then you got somebody who manages Box. somebody who manages the OneDrive and the other apps, cloud storage apps or whatever. And so what we didn't want to provide was a disjointed solution, right?
Sure.
And help the bolted on approach kind of continue to proliferate. So we did a comprehensive solution. So you don't have to piece together a bunch of packages. You don't have to spend an hour and a half trying to figure out what to buy. Your multiple IT admins can administer the same product.
Sure.
One administers, cloud storage, one administers email. You can do all that from within the same technology.
And you also made the point, which I think is important, is that, SonicWall, like any product, has a sort of a legacy reputation of just being a firewall vendor. And the good question from the audience was, well, don't I have to be on your firewall product to do this? What a great question. And the answer was no. Which was good.
Yeah, being API-based, we don't have any dependencies from the cloud app security perspective on any of our existing products. Clearly, we want you to use them, and you get a lot of value from using our Capture Security Center with that single pane of glass by plugging in the different technologies and managing them from the same space. But for cloud app security, we have no other product dependencies. You just need to be using a SaaS app like Office 365 or G Suite or Box or Dropbox.
And some of your other products work the same way. Like you can have a legacy investment in the firewall, but might want Capture client at your endpoints. And those can bypass the firewall and go right up to the security center, which I found, now it's more powerful to kind of tie it in through the firewall, but if they're just bought the firewalls 2 months ago, we're not going to get them off of it for a little while.
Right. And every customer is different and their business needs are different. And nobody is going out buying all new technology across their space in one day. And it's an evolution. And so, as a customer, you get whichever vendor you select, as many products as you can consolidate into a single platform for management, reporting, and security effectiveness, the bigger benefit it is to you. Is it practical to think that every single one of our customers is going to have every piece of our technology? No. And so we want to give you that flexibility so that you can manage the products that you have in a solid, cohesive way. And then if you are not happy with another technology, you can potentially replace them going forward and keep it all together in a really tightly integrated fashion.
So as we wrap up here, what motivates you every day? Why do you keep at this? You saw the slide I put up there, and security is it's really fast moving. And, we talked about state of the market. The audience had a choice. Are you trying to meet the vendor state of the market, the state of the current threat landscape, or the state of the governance landscape?
Yes.
Like, where are you going? How are you managing it? And it's a verb, not a noun. So how do you keep your perspective and what drives you?
Oh, that's a good question. So what I would say is, having survived 16 plus years in this industry, it is not for the faint of heart. It is changing every day. Threat landscape changes constantly. There is literally never a dull moment. And so you stay on your toes. And if you're a person who kind of likes to hang out and, you get comfortable in your job, and this is not the industry for you, definitely, And so the fact that things are constantly changing, it's constantly fresh, it's, constantly evolving, really helps motivate me. And it keeps me from becoming stagnant. And there's so many different aspects of this industry. If I wanted to just focus on the advanced threat protection space, or if I wanted to focus on the DLP space, or if I wanted to go into network protection, there's so many different facets, and it gives you a lot of different ways to evolve.
Sure.
So that I think that really kind of what keeps me going, and just being able to evolve not only my career but my thoughts and how I look at the space. My kids get real sick of me using them as guinea pigs for presentations. They probably know a lot more about cybersecurity than they ever wish to know. Hopefully they'll pick up the torch one day. But yeah, it's a great industry, very fast paced. I'm a kind of person who, I don't sit very long. And so I need that fast paced environment. And it's been a good fit so far.
So everybody has a superpower.
Yes.
Everybody has something that they would consider their go-to strength. We're always trying to kind of fix our weaknesses. I sometimes believe that, we're best probably inclined to lean into our strengths and even make them more powerful. Kind of looking back over your career and kind of where you are now, where do you see your unique superpower being in your job, with your teams, with SonicWall?
Yeah, so, that's an interesting question. So I guess I would have to say I have an art for conveying bad information and someone still come out smiling. Actually, when I was in Tier 3, I was known for being able to deliver the absolute worst possible customer news and the customer still loving us at the end of the phone call. I'm not entirely sure how I managed to achieve that, but I was pretty much hey, if you need somebody to get bad news, you need them to be told no, or we can't do something, have her, call Shannon, she'll do it. And at the end of the day, you have to be truthful with people, right? You have to be as frank as you can. Nobody wants a bunch of smoke blown.
Sure.
And so I find that, being truthful with people, telling them what you can do versus all the things that you can't do, right, goes a long way. And they respect that. And they may not like the situation, but as long as you provide the data points and the information to help them understand, they get it. They may not love you at the end, but maybe it's my Texas charm. They still come out smiling. But yeah, I would say that's my superpower. I'm not sure it's a great superpower, but it is one nonetheless.
It's a skill that, someone in the product development that's had boots on the ground at customer help desk.
Yes.
I mean, that's the type of person you want developing your products, right?
Yes.
Because they're going to they've felt the pain of having to convey information about, someone's issues. So it's kind of interesting how you've gotten to the point where you are today.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. And I really appreciate you coming down and spending time with our customers and potential customers and just talking about the threat landscape and how you're solving problems. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Bill. It was so great to come out. Like I said, it's like the best part of my job is doing these events, and you guys have been such a welcoming team. Red Zone is always great to work with. So thank you guys.
You're welcome. Until next time.
Absolutely.
So there you have it. This wraps another episode of Bill Murphy's Red Zone podcast. To get all the relevant show notes, please go to our blog at www.redzonetech.net/podcasts. Additionally, make sure you go to iTunes and leave your comments in iTunes about the show. This helps our show rankings enormously, and it helps support the show. Until next time, I appreciate you very much for listening. Thank you.